Hello, and welcome to Night Treks. The night is dark, so it's time for a tale. I'm Tom, your ghost host, and this is our strange journey into one story that is dark, strange, and true, but maybe not. We'll leave that for you to decide. Tonight's tale: The Bird Which Devours Men. Now, I read tonight an excerpt from the book The Paisa, An Indian Tradition of Illinois by John Russell, published in 1836. He writes, "No part of the United States, not even the highlands of the Hudson, can vie in wild romantic scenery with the bluffs of Illinois on the Mississippi. Between the mouths of the Missouri and Illinois rivers, on one side of the river, often at the water's edge, a perpendicular wall of rock rises to the height of some 100 feet. Generally, on the opposite shore is a little level bottom or prairie of several miles in extent, extending to a similar bluff that runs parallel with the river. One of these strange ranges commences at Alton and extends for many miles along the left bank of the Mississippi. In descending the river to Alton, the traveler will observe, between that town and the mouth of the Illinois River, a narrow ravine through which a small stream discharges its waters into the Mississippi." Now, this is just a side note. This is just north of St. Louis on the Illinois side. This stream is the Pisa. It's spelled Piasa. Its name is Indian and signifies in the Illini the bird which devours men. Near the mouth of this stream, on the smooth and perpendicular face of the bluff, at an elevation which no human art can reach, is cut a figure of an enormous bird with its wings extended. The animal which the figure represents was called by the Indians the Paisa, from which this is derived the name of the stream. The tradition of the Pisa is still current among the tribes of the upper Mississippi and those who have inhabited the valley of the Illinois, and is briefly this. Many thousand moons ago, before the arrival of the palefaces, when the great Magalonyx and the mastodon, whose bones are now dug up, there existed a bird of such dimensions that he could easily carry off in his talons a full-grown deer. And then, having obtained a taste for human flesh, from that time he would prey on nothing else. He was artful as he was powerful, and would dart suddenly and unexpectedly upon an Indian, bear him off into one of the caves of the bluff, and devour him. Hundreds of warriors attempted for years to destroy him, but without success. Whole villages were nearly depopulated, and consternation spread through all the tribes of the Illini. Such was the state of affairs when Oatoga, the great chief of the Illini, whose fame extended beyond the Great Lakes, separating himself from the rest of his tribe, fasted in solitude for the space of a whole moon, and prayed to the Great Spirit, the Master of Life, that he would protect his children from the Pisa. On the last night of the fast, the Great Spirit appeared to Oatoga in a dream and directed him to select 20 of his bravest warriors, each armed with a bow and poisoned arrows, and conceal them in a designated spot. Near the place of concealment, another warrior was to stand in open view as a victim for the Pisa, which they must shoot the instant he pounced upon his prey. When the chief awoke in the morning, he thanked the Great Spirit, and returning to his tribe, told them his vision. The warriors were quickly selected and placed in ambush as directed. Oatoga offered himself as the victim. He was willing to die for his people. Placing himself in open view on the bluffs, he soon saw the Paisa perched on the cliffs, eyeing his prey. The chief drew up his manly form to his utmost height and, planting his feet firmly in the earth, he began to chant the death song of an Indian warrior. The moment after, the Paisa arose in the air and, swift as a thunderbolt, darted down on his victim. Scarcely had the horrid creature reached his prey before every bow was sprung and every arrow was sent quivering to the feather into his body. The Paisa uttered a fearful scream that sounded far over the opposite side of the river and expired. Oatoga was unharmed. Not an arrow, not even the talons of the bird had touched him. The master of life, in admiration of Oatoga's deed, had held over him an invisible shield. There was the wildest rejoicing among the Illini, and the brave chief was carried in triumph to the council house, where it was solemnly agreed that in memory of the great event in their nation's history, the image of the Paisa should be engraved on the bluff. Such is the Indian tradition. Of course, I cannot vouch for its truth. This much, however, is certain, that the figure of a huge bird cut in the solid rock is still there. And a side note, it has been lost to time, but it has been recreated in a similar spot in a different place. But it is still there. You can still see the image in modern times. Back to the book. The figure of a huge bird cut in the solid rock is still there and at a height that is perfectly inaccessible. How and for what purpose it was made, I leave it for others to determine. Even at this day, an Indian never passes the spot in his canoe without firing his gun at the figure of Paisa. The marks of the balls on the rock are almost innumerable. Near the close of March of the present year, that's 1836, I was induced to visit the bluffs below the mouth of the Illinois River, above that of the Paisa. My curiosity was principally directed to the examination of a cave connected with the above tradition as one of those to which the bird had carried his human victims. Preceded by an intelligent guide who carried a spade, I set out on my excursion. The cave was extremely difficult to access, and at some point in our progress, I stood at an elevation of some 150 feet on a perpendicular face of the bluff with barely room to sustain 1 foot. The unbroken wall towered above me, while below was the river. After a long and perilous climb, we reached the cave, which was about 50 feet above the surface of the river. By the aid of a long pole placed on a projecting rock and the upper end touching the mouth of the cave, we succeeded in entering it. Nothing could be more impressive than the view from the entrance of that cavern. The Mississippi was rolling in silent grandeur beneath us. High over our heads, a single cedar tree hung its branches over the cliff, and on one of the dead, dry limbs was seated a bald eagle. No other sign of life was near us. A Sabbath stillness rested on the scene. Not a cloud was visible on the heavens. Not a breath of air was stirring. The broad Mississippi was before us, calm and smooth as a lake. The landscape presented the same wild aspect as it did before it had met the eye of white man. The roof of the cavern was vaulted, and the top was hardly less than 20 feet high. The shape of the cavern was irregular, but so far as I could judge, the bottom would average 20 by 30 feet. The floor of the cavern throughout its whole extent was one mass of human bones. Skulls and other bones were mingled in the utmost confusion. To what depth they extended, I was unable to decide, but we dug to the depth of 3 or 4 feet in every part of the cavern, and still we found only bones. The remains of thousands must have been deposited here. How and by whom, and for what purpose, it is impossible to conjecture. So, what do you think? Could a massive bird, large enough to carry away a large deer or even a human being, have preyed on the ancient Illini tribe? Was John Russell sharing a true tale about this cavern? Was there a cave full of human bones? And why was a bald eagle perched at the mouth of the cave, watching over his progenitor's bone cave? Or was this all just a fanciful work of fiction? You decide. Well, the tale is told and we are done. Until the next dark night, when we take our night treks, this is your ghost host, Tom, wishing you safe but strange night treks. Night treks. Night treks. Night treks.